Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network website, thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program today as talking about the award-winning new book, The Missing Semester. Your financial choices have consequences. Will you choose wisely? Matt Kabala, Gene Natali Jr., our guest on the program today. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. It is great to have you with us.
Rick, thank you. An absolute pleasure to be talking with you.
I mentioned award-winning, just recently got the 2013 Institute for Financial Literacy Adult Book of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Thank you, Rick. It was a great honor. Again, as Gene said, it's really great to be with you. And, it was a tremendous honor to be in Orlando with the Institute for Financial Literacy last week. We never really thought that we'd be here at this point after a couple years working on this project, but it's been a great experience, and we're really thrilled to where we've made it thus far.
Well, it's a very important book, and a lot of reviews say it's a must-have for every graduate, high school, college graduate. I'm well beyond those years, and I'm looking through it, and there's information, first of all, I wish I would have had back then, and second of all, information that I can use today. So the book is excellent. It's full of information. On the back cover, a quote that's very basic from Abraham Lincoln: "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." And Gene, I'll start with you. Basically, the purpose of the book is ownership, and explain that, where it's up to each of us to take over ownership of our financial life.
Yep, and that can be true of many subjects, Rick, but particularly with the subject of finances, the buck stops with us as individuals. And Matt and I almost made a mistake with this book. We were plugging along the first chapter. We were 13 pages in and said, wow, we're doing great. Then we said, stop. Who is still reading this book? Completely shifted our focus to short chapters, and to your question about ownership, short chapters with a call to action. It's not a book about how much either Matt or I know about finances. It's a book about what our readers need to know. And to be successful, we did have to transfer the ownership of the ideas within the book to the reader. And that seems to be working. I think that's what's driving a lot of the success the book has had.
Well, and you basically start off by talking about consequences. Mentioned that in the title of the book, The Missing Semester, Your Financial Choices Have Consequences, and consequences that affect so many people. Matt, as you're doing the book and as you're thinking back on your experience of the people that you know and talking to them as you're putting the book together, do you find that most of us have suffered like really negative consequences because of a lack of knowledge?
I absolutely think so. I think a good example would be the recent housing crisis that
Yes.
this country went through. I think a lot of people weren't aware of the consequences of the decisions they were making when they were signing on the bottom line, let's say, of a house they shouldn't be purchasing or frankly couldn't afford. That's a very serious consequence that unfortunately a lot of our fellow Americans had to deal with as a result of that unfortunate decision they made. And frankly speaking, it could go for a lot of things, whether it's your job, maybe the career you're in, maybe your choice as far as education goes. You really have to focus on these decisions you make and really think about the financial implications that you're going to have to deal with at some point in your future.
Some of the statistics you start with are alarming, that 70% of us live paycheck to paycheck. 43% of the households actually spend more money than they take in. And we've heard this statistic: 1 out of 4 homeowners owe more money than their home is worth. And about 50% of us in the baby boomer category really don't have enough money to retire. So the numbers are very stark. And Gene, they're somewhat alarming that we keep making the same mistakes over and over again, it seems like.
They're alarming, and candidly, they're worse since the book went to print. The only reason we need to edit this version is because those statistics are worsening. You made the point with your first comments, Rick, about a broad audience. I would draw the analogy to a very simple tool, the hammer. No matter what age any one of us learns to use a hammer and nails, it works the same. And if you get unlucky and maybe whack your thumb on the first go, it doesn't mean the hammer doesn't work. Means you step back, rethink, and learn how to apply the tool. So you hit the nail on the head, to be cliche there, with your first comment. This subject affects the entire country. And to those statistics you just referenced, a kind of secondary goal of Matt's in mind is to make this subject a dinner table conversation. There's no reason parents shouldn't be talking with children about money, about the cost of college, about whether they can afford it, etc.
Well, and you mentioned in the book, and we're talking on the program, Gene Natali Jr. and Matt Kabala. They're authors of the new award-winning book, The Missing Semester, Your Financial Choices Have Consequences. Will you choose wisely? The book available at Amazon, available all across the country. They have an excellent website called themissingsemester.com. Of course, you can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and get information there as well. You make the point, Gene, that it's never too young to get started. You can start at an early age. In fact, you actually got started at an early age. I believe you were a caddy at one point, and it's something you can do when you're 12, 13 years old, and you tried to figure out, okay, how can I go about saving money now?
Yeah, actually, Matt and I both were caddy. Lasted a little longer than his. That was, I don't know if that was, good just being born into a family that, work was a priority. So my parents had, my brother and I both started caddying at the age of 12. And I had the very good fortune of starting my Roth IRA at the age of 16. One of the single best choices I've ever made in my life.
The book is The Missing Semester. And Matt, one of the chapters, you start things off by basically the very basic. Again, talking about the rest of your life starts now. And what I really like about the book is you're telling us something, and some of it may be, well, okay, I can understand that. But then you're like explaining it further, so it really makes some sense for us. The basic point there was, don't let your spending dictate your saving. And it's like, okay, that does make sense, but how do I go about implementing that? And you basically give us the graphs, the charts, the information, and by that I don't mean boring. It's very, very simple, so that we actually can live and follow that principle.
You're absolutely right. It is a very, very simple concept. There was a time in this country and many others that you didn't have to teach people that. Frankly, it was impossible. You could not let your spending dictate your savings, or you'd be out on the street. And we've come a long way from those days, and just as though we've had a culture change to get where we are now, I think it's going to take another cultural change in this country to get us back to those days where saving is a first priority as opposed to spending.
Well, as I'm reading that, you have a category called Everything Else, and that's one of the first times, in fact, maybe the first time that I'm really aware of reading that. I might have seen that before, but it never really registered. You've got the basics, and you put those in categories, but so much of what you spend, and you really don't understand it until you start actually going back and calculating in your mind, is that Everything Else category, and we really need to consider that when we're planning our budget.
Absolutely. For a lot of folks, that can be the biggest category, unfortunately, and the biggest culprit is instant gratification. And that's not a good thing to be spending money on.
Understanding debt is something else, and some of us will say, what we're spending on college, that's legitimate debt. It's usually low interest debt, at least it was a few years ago when the interest rates were quite high for everything else. Explain a little bit about understanding debt and some of the principles we need to keep in mind as we're dealing with what we consider to be good debt versus debt that we really need to get rid of quickly.
I'll just read you one of the quotes straight out of Chapter 2 about debt. Don't let your spending dictate your saving. And obviously, debt is a tool. Debt can have a very good purpose, buying a house, giving you a college education. Those are the pluses. The negatives are to the younger folks in your audience and the parents of these younger folks. We've all been there. You get a credit card application every week, if not every day, as a college student. That's a trap. That's a quick way to build up debt, and the average college student is graduating with close to $3,000 in credit card debt today.
Well, and you point out in the book, and it's staggering, and it's really something you need to factor into as you're getting an education and where you're getting an education. Basically, in the last 30 years, the tuition has gone up 498%. So basically, 5 times in that period. You're talking getting out of college with significant debt today.
Yeah, that's it. And there's absolutely, the statistics are unarguable in the value of education. Where there's a little more of a gray area is what's the proper amount to pay for that education. And we would suggest that amount differs by individual. It depends on your passions. It depends on your possible career choice. It depends on your family income, what you can afford. I would suggest that, and again, another premise behind the book was the recognition that we live in a knowledge-based economy. Information is a screen tap away. If you can choose your college and you can complement that education a wide variety of ways. You can get Take a class from MIT online for free, I believe. Now, you don't get the degree, but you get the knowledge.
Our guest on the program, Gene Natali Jr., Matt Kabala, author of the award-winning book, The Missing Semester. Your financial choices have consequences. Will you choose wisely? The book is available Amazon.com all across the country. Information at their website, themissingsemester.com. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. In fact, you can link on there as well. And talking about student loans, when you look at that and you suddenly decide, okay, I'm going to tackle this. Let's see, this one is $15,000, this one is $5,000. Let's get rid of the bigger one first. And you're saying what you really need to do, look at the interest rate. That's basically, in the long run, going to be much better for you tackling that in that fashion.
Yeah, Rick, I'm glad you covered that. It's an important point that, frankly, going back to the dinner table conversations we wish everybody was having with their kids about finances, it may be a simple concept, but people need to think about it. Really, the interest rate is the important aspect of what you need to consider when paying back these loans. Frankly speaking, you have an interest rate at 10% on a certain loan and maybe 2% on the other. You really need to focus on paying off the principal of that higher rate loan to really make a dent in the principal over time.
Let's talk about car loans, another chapter that I found interesting. And I say that I was listening the other day, and a number of institutions now, car dealers and banks, are offering an 8-year loan for a car. And the motivation in doing that is to keep the payments down to about $300. That's sort of that psychological barrier. We don't want to go over $300. First of all, I'll ask you, and you make the point in there, you're going through new or used. Every car is a used car. As soon as you drive it off the lot, you've lost, 20%? You point out in the book, and it's a used car at that point. So as you're actually trying to determine this, 8 years, does it make any sense for anybody to finance a car for 8 years?
We won't answer that with a yes or no, because every case is independent. But the disadvantage of an 8-year loan, independent of the interest rate, is that you do not build up equity in the car. So if you do have to sell that car at 3, 4, 5 years, you likely would not have equity, which means you're not going to be able to have any cash at the time of selling your car. I will just regress to a real quick story. When Matt and I were writing the book, it wasn't just he and I. We actually used a panel of 30 quote-unquote advisors from all across the country with various backgrounds. And I first got excited about the book, to your question, when one of those advisors called me and said, Gene, I want you to know we were just at a car dealer. My daughter, she was 26 years old. My daughter was talking to the car salesman about buying her first car. And he was wheeling and dealing, and she said, stop. Sir, I just read a book called The Missing Semester, and I don't think what you're saying makes sense for my particular case. And he, as the proud dad, said he was just sitting back with his arms across his chest and grinning. So sorry to regress, but I thought that might be a good story.
No, that is interesting, and it's the key, and I said this as we were getting ready to do the program, I've been doing these programs for a number of years, and we've talked a lot about financial literacy. It's got to start at a young age. And we don't seem to be getting any traction. Now with this book, The Missing Semester, and the anecdotes that you're sharing with us, we have a chance now for some traction, that people are learning at an early age, because usually someone goes in that category, they're a real mark for the salesman, because they're going to, wow, that sounds great, and you buy a little bit more than you should. You listen to the sales pitch, and you're not really thinking it through. And she's basically saying, stop, I know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to do that. That has to be rewarding for you to wow, we actually helped that young lady save some money in the long run.
Yep. Rick, and right there, when you say that, the first thought that pops in my mind is, geez, how did we get here? So many people are working hard on financial literacy. How did we get here? And Matt and I view that the world as having 4 pillars in the box of financial literacy. You can blame, broadly speaking, the educational system and say we're not learning it in the schools. Check 1. You can blame the financial system, say that our financial advisors are more concerned with the bottom line than on the education, again, broadly speaking. You can blame your families and say we're not talking about this. But the 4th pillar is the most important, and that is us as individuals. At the end of the day, you can't point the finger at yourself, particularly with the massive amount of information that's now available.
Well, and that's a great place. We've got about a minute left in the program. That's where we started talking about ownership. It is your life, your financial decisions. You need to take ownership of those. The book is The Missing Semester. The website is themissingsemester.com. It's an excellent book for a graduate this time of year. It's an excellent book to read. And you mentioned it's interesting, the dinner table conversation. I'm thinking, wow, this would have been great when the kids were growing up to actually sit there. And it's very basic stuff. I mean, this is just stuff that's so well written. So sometimes we get these terms, we don't fully understand this, and you break this down. We talked about loans. You talked about the difference between principal and interest. Sounds basic, yet if you ask most of us, we would stumble over the right answers for that. Matt, I want to throw this to you as we're wrapping up. Again, going back to that, what we talked about in the beginning, that it's never too early to start. You make a case that if you start very young, usually after college, and save just $1,000 a year with compounding interest, by the time you're ready to retire, you've got a nice little nest egg that's started for you.
Rick, you're absolutely right. You know, Gene and I just saw a fantastic presentation on this concept, and it's very simple, compound interest. Most of us do not understand the concept. It is very, very powerful, but the one important aspect of that thing, of compound interest, is time. You have to have time working on your side. You cannot start tomorrow and expect a week from now for compound interest to work on your behalf. You've got to start as soon as possible as a young adult. And if you just give yourself that opportunity to allow compound interest to work on your behalf, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with the results, as you mentioned.
And when you think $1,000 and you break that down, that's what, $80-some in change per month. That's not a whole lot to get you started. And if you continue that, I mean, it's amazing. I really enjoyed reading the book, and I highly recommend it. The Missing Semester. Your financial choices have consequences. Will you choose wisely? Matt Kabala, Gene Natali Jr., our guest on This Week in America. We will have them back. Their website is themissingsemester.com. The book is available all across the country. You can look it up at Amazon. You go to their website and, of course, link on at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Matt, Gene, excellent job. Once again, congratulations on the success of the book, the award. You're touching a lot of lives. Look forward to having you back in the program.
Rick, thank you. A pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.